I have figured it out. After scavenging through every source imaginable, I now know what is in Final Fantasy X-3, and I am going to share it with you today. We're going to be covering 3 main sections. 1 is the road so far. It is all of the facts and the history about Final Fantasy X-3. 2 is what we can speculate. And this is all grounded speculation based on the facts that we actually have about what is going to be in X-3 and whether a X-3 is going to exist. Part 3 is, do we even want a sequel at all? And will the content that will be in Final Fantasy X-3 be something that Final Fantasy X fans are happy about? Let's start with what we do know about Final Fantasy X-3. It has been teased several times throughout the years. I think the latest time dating back to 2021. The original director of Final Fantasy X said that there is a treatment or an outline already written. This treatment was written by Kazushige Nojima, who is the same writer as Final Fantasy X, X-2, the 2.5 novella, as well as the audio drama. What the novella does is reverts Yuna's character from Final Fantasy X-2 into the character she was in Final Fantasy X. The novella also introduced a concept called the beckoning, which allows summoners to do a forbidden ritual of taking spirits out of the far plane. This then creates a rip in the far plane and allows things to come back like Sin. In the audio drama, Sin is able to come back because of the beckoning, and we have new characters introduced. Everyone of the main cast, including Yuna and Tidus, are older. We also know that the novella and the audio drama is panned and hated by most Final Fantasy X diehard fans. And I have to admit that I am in that category of people. As I've expressed in my novella video, I do not see how Sin can come back when Sin was never alive. Shouldn't it be Yu Yevon who is able to return? Other people have criticisms such as this is cheapening the ending of Final Fantasy X and retconning everything that happened in Final Fantasy X. I think that's understandable, but at the same time, it is a sequel, and the sequel has to do something with the world. That about wraps it up for what we do know about Final Fantasy X-3. It is still very much shrouded in mystery. This is when we enter into the more speculative territory of what might be in X-3. Now, I do want to say in the speculation space of Final Fantasy X-3, there is a lot of desires and hopes out there for what Final Fantasy X-3 is going to be, but I actually believe that Square Enix is going in a very finite direction. They continue to tease a treatment about Final Fantasy X, and this treatment had to have been written during the same time as the audio drama and the novella. That is because they have not been working on this since then. The fact that the director continues to bring up the treatment suggests that he is still in favor of it. I do want to say, though, that a treatment or an outline is just that, and the audio drama is more like a proof of concept. In Final Fantasy X, it was originally going to be 17, and many plot elements changed throughout the development. I can see a lot changing throughout the development of Final Fantasy X-3 from the treatment, but from what we've seen in sequels like Final Fantasy X-2 and the 2.5 novella, we can see patterns that they are probably going to employ and make some reasonable guesses of the direction that they're going to go in. It's going to adopt some elements of Final Fantasy X and discard others. So it's going to choose what parts to more closely match and what parts to deviate from. In the audio drama, the original characters in Final Fantasy X are older, and they have introduced a new generation of characters. Final Fantasy X is a generational story. We have the older characters, such as Auron, Jet, and Braska, and how they have influenced the new generation of Tidus and Yuna. In Final Fantasy X-3, I can see them deviating from the original characters of the party. That is because Yuna's arc has more or less wrapped up between 10 and 10-2. At the end of Final Fantasy X-2, Yuna was 19 and she was soon gonna be 20. That is about the maximum age you are when you're in a Final Fantasy game. In a world like Spira, we also want to see the world progress through time with the political conflicts. The game is unlikely to take place a year later or 2 years later. It's probably going to take place 5 or 10 years later, a similar span of time between the time that Jet went missing. and Tidus's journey began. This is different from what we saw in Final Fantasy X-2, because in Final Fantasy X-2, X-2 kept some of the core characters, such as Yuna and Riku, as well as the main party. Not much time had passed, so they stayed about the same. When the game had characters that are from the original game, they are able to make some certain deviations. They made certain deviations that I think they may not make in a X-3 because they had a character like Yuna grounding the game. Most of Final Fantasy X-2 centered on Yuna and her core struggle of finding herself in a new world. With X-2, they changed the tone and they changed a lot of the themes. So X-2 really had a fresh skin to it. But they added some elements to keep it in the world of Final Fantasy X, like they created Vegnagun, which was kind of like a sin. And they played a lot with political conflicts and power, which is also something that's in Final Fantasy X. But what X-2 went without was a lot of the darker themes about death. There wasn't really anything about family legacy. Final Fantasy X-2 also decided to have a more open world feel to it as opposed to the original game. So this created more of a mission-based game, and it was less plot-heavy. In Final Fantasy X-3, I think they're going to have new characters in some different themes with those characters, but I think that they're also going to bring more of the traditional plot elements of Final Fantasy X back into it. Final Fantasy X-2 will hardly be mentioned at all. My reason for believing that is because in all future cameos of Yuna, she is the old Yuna and she's acting very traditional, like her old self. The novella and the last mission also show that Yuna has reverted a bit and is more of a traditional Yuna. Final Fantasy X-2 was basically a fun adventure, and all that really happened at the end of it was Tidus came back. But I also have a video that explains that Tidus came back in Final Fantasy X, so really Final Fantasy X-2 doesn't need to have existed in Final Fantasy X-3. We also have patterns that we can guess about from Final Fantasy X-2 and from the novella. So both in X-2 and in the novella, there was a B plot that involved Zanarkand and some form of history around Zanarkand. It is very likely that something in the very far past is going to come back in the game. It is also reasonable to guess that they're going to have a battle system that is unlike X and X-2, but it will have something to do with spheres. In Final Fantasy X-2, there was a concept of Oversoul, where after a certain number of fiends you defeat, one of the fiends becomes filled with pyreflies and becomes a dark version of itself. That fiend is more powerful. Because there is a chance that they're going to introduce this beckoning concept, I can imagine that there will be some form of gameplay that will have to do with creatures coming out of the far plane and maybe being more powerful or having different abilities than originally thought. In this new sequel, there will definitely be a sin-like threat. There will be a party of some sort with younger characters, new characters, and we are probably going to see the generational themes come back. We're probably going to be seeing Yuna and Tidus and more of an Auron type role. Because Yuna is so iconic, I still think that she would play a pivotal role in the game. I can also see her becoming an anti-hero that over the years she had descended by being involved in New Yevon, or becoming tired and worn down by politics. And it would be up to the youth to bring back or remind Yuna who she once was. I do think it's hard to remember that you're the High Summoner who brought the Eternal Calm, especially if, as the novella suggests, Yuna is the person who accidentally brought back Sin. So here we are. All of that said, do we even want a sequel? If it is as dire as we hope for it to be? And why do I think that they are still going to go in this direction when everyone hates this so much? Well, I really think that there isn't very many directions they can go. The old cast is older now. We know that they don't plan to do a prequel. Also, the director hasn't said anything negative about the treatment that was written. As I said, I think the treatment will evolve significantly, but I still think that likely what they're going to do is have a younger cast. They're going to have Yuna and Tidus in more of an Auron position. I also think that the game is going to be a true sequel to 10 and kind of forget 10-2 as having existed. Do I think Final Fantasy X-3 will happen? I think yes. The game has been teased too many times. As they said, they already have a treatment written, and they're just waiting to make it. Do I think there needs to be a sequel? Absolutely not. Do I want a sequel? Absolutely yes. And my reasons for wanting a sequel have to do with seeing updated graphics. I really want to see Mount Gagazet in updated graphics. I really want to see Besaid Island. I would also just love to hear the characters again. I would love the voice actors to reprise their roles. And I also think that no matter what they do, they cannot ruin Final Fantasy X, and they shouldn't be ruining Final Fantasy X for you. These are fictional characters, and each piece of work is self-contained. Any piece of fiction exists in a form of simultaneous time, like Tidus is on his pilgrimage as simultaneously as Tidus is a dream who has faded, as he is coming back at the end of the credits. Final Fantasy X stands alone and is a product of its time. And whatever comes afterward is just a sequel. At least I will just look at it as a fictional product made by people. Please let me know what you think about Final Fantasy X-3, and do you think Final Fantasy X-3 will happen? And if you like this video, you will definitely want to see my video about the ending of Final Fantasy X. It'll totally blow your mind. I just need you to believe me. All right, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!